This is the Fix Your Sciatica podcast. The magic of this podcast is that it provides actionable steps to the listeners, people like you who are experiencing sciatica pain. And that is the main goal of what I'm trying to do, is provide you all action steps to be able to take charge of your pain. And in the event that you really do need me, you give me a call. But ultimately, there's going to be a point in time where, in some cases, you might not necessarily need me. You might just really benefit from the information. And so today's guest is going to be sharing her experience in regards to what she's gotten from the podcast and the really cool success story that she's gone through. And so today's episode, I have Angie, who we had the opportunity to meet a couple weeks ago, and she was kind enough to share her story. So Angie, thank you so much for being on today's episode.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited because I'll tell you what, I produce these episodes and I publish them. And a lot of times I'll get off and I'll publish these episodes and I'll think, who listens to this? I really hope that this is valuable and beneficial. And when we met, it was cool because you ended up discovering me through my podcast and we had an opportunity to speak a little bit more about the pain that you've gone through. And so for the listeners out there, tell us a little bit more about yourself and walk us through what your pain journey was like.
Yeah, sure. Hello. All right. So my name's Angie. I live in Florida. Long story short, back in October, I had surgery that made me go on bed rest. And I had never had sciatica before. And about 2 weeks into that bed rest, I all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, like this is what people talk about. Like, I have a lot of friends that have talked about it, a lot of pregnant friends who, talk about it. And I'm like, all I know is it's very painful. That's the only thing I really know about it. So when I was actually experiencing it, to me, it just felt like so overwhelming in my body. It just consumed me. Couldn't sleep, like everything hurt all the time. So unfortunately, it lasted probably about 6 months, and it went away probably in March, I would say. And then back in a month ago, May, I had to get, unfortunately, another surgery, and that put me in a hospital for a week. And I kept thinking like, oh my gosh, I hope the sciatica doesn't come back. And I was on so much medicine that I really couldn't feel it if it was there. And as soon as I got home and got off all the medication right away, I was like, oh, it's back, and it's back with a vengeance. And it was the same side. It's my right side going from my low back all the way down into my glute. Like the glute part probably hurts the worst. And then down that right leg. And then it kind of ended in the kneecap. So again, I was kind of like on bed rest or just like had to take it easy. So like, I just felt like I really couldn't do anything about it. Like, I would do like in bed, like a reclined figure 4, wouldn't really do much. So I just kind of felt like I was like stuck. Like I was like, I just feel like it's just constant pain in my head. It was driving me crazy. In my body, it was driving me crazy, but I just felt like there wasn't much I could do. So I started YouTubing, sciatica, and I found a lot of things. And then when I was on Spotify, I typed in sciatica, and then I found you. And I just started listening to so many of you had so many different topics, and all of them kind of resonated with me differently, which was so amazing. And I started to really get some great tips and tricks. And then you and I scheduled a call, and then it started getting better.
Man, it's quite the journey. Yeah, surgeries themselves are really tough. And to be put on bed rest, listeners out there, if you've ever had the opportunity to say lay in a hospital bed, they're not comfortable. They're designed to change positions to make sure that you don't get bed sores, and also they get repositioned so you can avoid blood clots. But bed sore prevention doesn't necessarily equate to the best from an orthopedic standpoint or even from a comfort standpoint. And I think you said you're involved with yoga. And so to be someone who is so active to transitioning to full on bed rest, I mean, not only from a body perspective, I can imagine how challenging that was just from like a mental and energy standpoint. You probably just wanted to move, but you were told you had to stay in bed. And that in itself is really, really tough. And I love the fact that you, much like other listeners out there, wanted to try to get this done, like address as quickly as possible, but also you kind of have this, I like to call it like a do-it-yourself type of thing. It's like you discover the information, you implement, and you try to do everything that you could. And so it was also really exciting for you to hear that you were getting something from the podcast themselves, which then brings me up to my next question for you is, as you were listening to these episodes, what were the principles or action steps that you actually found the most valuable for you?
Yeah, definitely. So there was one about fascia. So being a yoga teacher, I know a lot about fascia. I know about the deep connected tissues. So I was like, oh, like I always love when I can learn a little bit, but also when it relates to you, it makes it even more special. So listening to that episode, for me, it was like, okay, let me get out those tennis balls. Let me start to apply this pressure, play with it, see how it feels. I think one of my biggest problems I had was I started taking Tylenol for the pain. And when I started doing that, yeah, the pain went away, which is obviously the goal, but it wasn't like allowing me to like feel into my body, to feel like, hey, like, does this feel better? Does this feel worse? I was having a hard time with like sensation versus pain. So, listening to your podcast, there was another one about like cold therapy. So, here I am, like granted, I'm in Florida, so it's a lot easier. I'm from Michigan originally, so it'd be a lot harder. But like I end with those cold showers and I set the intention of like, hey, let this cold water like heal me. Let this cold water like, give my sciatic some relief. And so that I think was my biggest like aha moment was like, okay, there are all these steps and tricks and things that can help me, but I need to set that intention. I need to tell my mind and tell my body, I'm ready to heal you and let's do it together, basically. And so I had to get off the Tylenol because it was like that. I didn't want to be on it long term. I hate being on medicine. So for me, it was like, okay, let's start to figure out, you had some podcasts about like vegan, your diet. So it's like, okay, let me get some more anti-inflammatory foods in me, like, let's just kind of like reinvent the whole wheel. Let's just start over.
Very cool. Yeah. It's exciting to hear you talk all about all these podcasts. I mean, obviously I was the one who conducted them, but I really vividly remember those conversations and really enjoyed them because when it comes to pain itself is it's a stimulus that goes into your brain, and just like any other stimulus, it's just like any other electrical signal, but it's your brain that actually processes and determines whether or not the experience that you're having right now is painful. And I love the fact that you looked at it as a whole picture, which is what it should be when it comes to what you put in your body, even just being able to determine the difference between the sensation versus pain, and this concept of using Tylenol. When I was a college swimmer, I was in a lot of pain pretty much all the time because I would just train hours and hours. I would train pretty much 6 to 7 hours a day, and I would just be constantly sore. And there were some cases where I was so sore that I would pop 3 Advil just to take the edge of pain, take the edge off. And interestingly enough, I would take the Advil before practice. My soreness would go away. But interestingly enough, I would jump in the water and I wouldn't breathe during the practice because I felt like I didn't need to. I didn't feel that burn. I didn't feel that need to breathe. And then all of a sudden I would realize, oh my gosh, I have to start breathing. So there is a place for medicine. That medicine will, in fact, allow us to take the edge off, allows us to live our life. But in some cases, if you want to be able to focus on your healing, you have to be able to get to a point where you are mentally ready to say, I'm going to embrace this and make the necessary changes. As you said, the intention itself. And it's the attitude. You believe that you could actually heal, which allowed you to actually make yourself heal and take those necessary action steps. And then as you were going through and listening to all this, you booked a call with me. And when you booked a call with me, what were the initial intentions around it? What were you kind of hoping you would get out of that call?
Yeah, no, and well, first of all, I so appreciate the fact that it was free. I just kept saying, like, I can't believe this man is doing this for free. Like, it was so, like, my mom even was like, this is so nice of him. I'm like, I know, because like you're genuine, like you care, you want to help people. And that's kind of why I feel like, hey, if I can help someone, through this podcast, that is awesome, because you kind of feel helpless and hopeless. And you just feel like, especially since my last bout of it was 6 months long, I was like, I can't live like this for another 6 months. I mean, it's just like pure agony. Like there was times where like, I would be like, I felt like I was going to cry, and I feel like I have pretty good pain tolerance. But it was like, like I would be on a walk and it was like, I felt like I was dragging my leg behind me. So I guess the thing I had with when I booked my call with you was just like, I felt like there was hope. Like when your whole your everything about you is I fix your sciatica. It's like, well, if there's someone that's going to do it, it's going to be this guy, because it's like, I just feel like sometimes when you talk to maybe other doctors, it's like, okay, let's see what we can do. I just felt like you were determined, like, no, we will fix it. Let's figure out what's going to work for you. And I had some limitations. So between that, it's like, and I think one of the questions on the protocol was, what movement, forward bending, back bending, side, left, right, which one, where do you feel pain? Where do you feel relief? What feels good? And that was where I really had to like get tuned into my body, because it's almost like in my mind, when I would think of a forward fold or anything, I would just say, oh, that's going to be really painful. But it really wasn't. Certain postures in my head, I was like, oh, there's no way I could do it. But then once you're actually doing it and breathing and listening to your body, it's like, oh no, actually it's not as bad as I thought. And is this pain or is this sensation? And that was kind of where I had like that total, like, I was able to disconnect, and I felt like I was able to like kind of release it in a way, just mentally. And then it just started to like, felt like it was easing up, and it wasn't as painful as my mind was telling me it was.
This episode is brought to you by the Sciatica Protocol. Experience pain relief directly through your phone, anytime, anywhere. Interested in learning more? Check us out at ifixyoursciatica.com/the-sciatica-protocol. Yeah, pain is there to protect us, to make sure that we're not causing more damage. But in some cases, the pain that we're experiencing is not indicating damage. And when we're experiencing this, we kind of have, as you said, this concept of fear, where things are scary. And if you look at the internet, it's like, okay, well, I have sciatica. Some articles will say, never touch your toes, right? Other articles will say, oh no, a forward bend is exactly what you need to do. And so it ends up getting very, very confusing. And the reality is that pain itself is an individual experience. It's an experience. It's something that you are feeling. And so even though you and the person sitting next to you might have the same, what we call pain distribution, it might be actually caused by something completely different. For you, it was the prolonged bed rest that put you in that funky position. For someone else, it could be the fact that they lifted 250 pounds over and over again and they blew their back out. And so being able to focus on what makes you feel better gives you the opportunity to truly see and explore a little bit. It's that exploration, that opportunity to be able to see what helps, and being determined when we're managing pain, it's problem solving. And we have to figure out, okay, here's the situation. Let's gather the necessary information. And then from here, we can make an optimal decision based off of that. And so going off of this call, like, we had the opportunity to meet, told me a little bit more about yourself. At the time, we actually realized that it might not have been the best time for us to work together, just due to a whole bunch of different factors. And that's okay, because I have no problem saying that, maybe now is not the right time. And so from there, but we didn't work together, but I did give you some action steps, the things that you were able to follow, hopefully. And so you might have covered it actually in the previous question, but what were your biggest takeaways or action steps that you gathered from our call?
Yeah, definitely. I think hope was number one. I just definitely felt like hopeful, like, okay, you know what? Like, now it's the time. So I think when you and I talked, I was about 4 weeks post-surgery. I'm now at 6 weeks. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to listen to my body. I'm going to start doing some of the things. So some postures you and I talked about was like Sphinx pose and child's pose. And so I had open heart surgery. So, I couldn't, like, I just felt like I was like protecting my chest, and I just felt like so much tension in my body. And I was like, I'm just going to like slowly get into these postures and just see like what I can do. And if I can't do it, I'll back out and get out of it. So those were kind of like our takeaways, was like, let's just, kind of play with these postures, see what you can do, see how it feels. So I just started like very slowly, gradually getting into it. And once I could actually hold that Sphinx pose, like, to me, like, that was like the posture I needed, specifically. And so once I was able to hold that for a couple of minutes, so now I do it all the time. And it's like, and my chest is not down, which is good, so you're lifting it up, but you can just feel it in that low back. It's like, it's just like that opposite of what it was doing in the bed.
And for you listeners out there, if you're not quite familiar with what Sphinx pose is, it's a pose in yoga where you end up resting on your elbows. Also is very, very similar to, if you were to, if you ever Google it, like they call it the Mackenzie press up, where you're resting on your elbows. So we're facilitating this movement of back extension, which is actually particularly helpful with Angie coming off of, say, a week plus of bed rest, to make sure that you don't develop pressure ulcers. The bed actually changes position, but you're spending the majority of your time on your back in a relatively flexed posture. And so I remember one of the biggest things I said, well, I'm pretty confident that the pain that you're experiencing was caused by the bed rest that you were in. So we need to do the exact opposite of just trying to do as much movement as you physically can tolerate and that you can do given your current limitations. And that was the big thing. And knowing that, I knew that Angie was actually going to recover pretty quickly as she started to become a little bit more active. And it was so exciting to send you a text message the other day and to hear and to see that you were doing really well. And I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to share with the world, is saying that if you've been spending the majority of your time not moving due to a couple of different reasons, due to surgeries, due to the fear that you had because of the pain that you were in, get up and move. I've talked about this a lot on my email list, which listeners, if you really like the content that we're creating, join our email list at ifixyoursciatica.com. I actually produce emails and daily tips pretty much Monday through Friday, in addition to this podcast. So if you want more, feel free to head on over to our website, and that'll be in the show notes. And the key is just doing something, because if we lay there, things get more challenging. And I know for me, I'm a pretty antsy person. So I really applaud you. I mean, you really didn't have a choice, right? When you're put on bed rest, there's a reason why you're put on bed rest in the first place. But once you're cleared, time to get up and move it. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk about the future, Angie. You're recovering from your surgery. The restrictions are being taken off, and your pain is a lot less prominent in your life, which is a great thing. What's on the horizon for you? What are you looking forward to in the future?
Yeah, definitely. So just continuing to stay active. I can definitely walk a lot right now, which is great. I can do more yoga practices, more stretching specifically, I think is the key. And what I kind of learned throughout all of it is I just felt like my body was almost like locking up in fear when it was close to bedtime. That's when I had the most pain. And so that was me just telling myself, like, listen, you're not going to be here for a week. You're only going to be here for like 8 hours. I'm going to get you out of bed. So like the future, definitely, it's like I don't have like that constant nagging thought of like just that constant pain. I mean, being in pain is the absolute worst. I don't wish it upon my worst enemy, is the sciatic pain. So definitely we're going to be doing some traveling this summer. I'm going to be feeling a lot better. I'm going to be getting back to teaching classes, and right now I've been more of a student. So I've been doing a lot more meditation, which really helps. I'm a Reiki master, so doing more Reiki on myself, which also helps, just moving energy through the body, sending that healing intention, and then obviously trying to help others as well, because as you know, there's a lot of people going through this sort of pain.
Right on. Travel, helping other people. I mean, can't ask for more than that. That's
right.
Amazing.
Life is good. Yeah, I feel very appreciative now and grateful. Thanks to you. So it's kind of like you kind of put like a little fire in my butt. It was like, okay, you got to do something. Here I am listening to podcasts. It's like, it's helpful and I'm getting tips and tricks from it, but like, I need to now move forward and activate it and do it. It's like, I feel like sometimes you're just in your head so much feeling like, oh no, I did do a little thing, here or there, but it's like, you really need to spend the time, like get a little cheat sheet, have a piece of paper, do some postures. What feels good? Write it down. What doesn't feel good? Write it down. And then every day you start to notice progress. You start to notice, like, what's your pain level? Okay, it was a 10. Now it's like a 6. Okay, what did we do different? I think that's the biggest thing, is really tuning in to the sensations in your body, listening to yourself.
I love it. Speaking of which, that reminds me, Angie, thank you so much. I have actually created a sheet, a little cheat sheet, as Angie has just described, for my exclusive course. However, I'm going to give it to the listeners for free. So I'm actually going to be putting the link to that sheet in today's show notes so you can actually access it. Again, it's going to allow you to tune into your body and actually have you determine what action steps do you need to take to make yourself feel better. Angie, what an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for helping me. I so appreciate you. You help. I know you're helping many, and you're a good person.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you got some help from today's podcast. And for more info, check us out at ifixyoursciatica.com. Have a fantastic and pain-free day. No patient-therapist relationship is formed by listening to this podcast.
We are not providing medical advice, and all information should be confirmed by a medical provider.